$10 million. Hawk's smirk cut through the champagne-soaked air. Sink one red before I clear the table, and it's yours. The Royal Elysian erupted in laughter. Snooker champion Trent, the Hawk Hensley, was toying with a waitress holding a tray of shattered glass. Sarah Cruz, 24, invisible among the elite until a single accident made her tonight's entertainment. This wasn't an invitation. It was a public execution. Lose, Hawk announced to roaring cameras, and you're fired. Tonight. The trap was perfect. Refuse and humiliate her employer, or play and lose everything. Her manager whispered desperately, "Walk away." But Sarah's eyes traced the table's geometry with surgical precision, angles her Navy father had taught her to read like language. She saw what Hawk's ego had blinded him to. She picked up the cue. The crowd saw a lamb approaching slaughter. They had no idea the genius strategist who'd just turned the hunter into prey. Welcome to Life in Stories, where every tale reveals the hidden genius in ordinary people. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe. We craft narratives that inspire, challenge, and transform how you see the world. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now let's begin. $10 million. Hawk's smirk cut through the champagne-soaked air. Sink one red before I clear the table, and it's yours. The Royal Elysian erupted in laughter. Snooker champion Trent. The Hawk. Hensley was toying with a waitress holding a tray of shattered glass. Sarah Cruz, 28, invisible among the elite until a single accident made her tonight's entertainment. This wasn't an invitation. It was a public execution. Lose, Hawk announced to roaring cameras, and you're fired. Tonight. The trap was perfect. Refuse and humiliate her employer, or play and lose everything. Her manager whispered desperately, "Walk away." But Sarah's eyes traced the table's geometry with surgical precision, angles her Navy father had taught her to read like language. She saw what Hawk's ego had blinded him to. She picked up the cue. The crowd saw a lamb approaching slaughter. They had no idea about the genius strategist who'd just turned the hunter into prey. 30 minutes earlier, the Royal Elysian Lounge had been a different kind of battlefield. The venue didn't welcome ordinary people. It consumed them, displayed them, or erased them entirely. Tonight, for the annual Billiards for Hope charity exhibition, it had transformed into something between a Renaissance cathedral and a fashion runway. Crystal chandeliers descended like frozen waterfalls, each prism catching light and scattering it across glass floors that reflected infinity. Velvet booths lined the perimeter in deep burgundy, occupied by tech moguls, sports legends, and celebrities whose faces graced magazine covers. Sarah couldn't afford to buy the snooker tables. 3 of them, positioned like altars, sat beneath spotlights that could have illuminated stadium concerts. This wasn't about sport. This was spectacle. Every break, every sink, every chalk of a cue became performance art for an audience sipping $1,000 champagne. Sarah Cruz moved through this world like water through stone, present, essential, invisible. She carried her tray with the precision of a surgeon, her posture upright but unassuming, her movements economical. The black vest and white shirt of the serving staff rendered her part of the decor. Her warm brown skin caught the chandelier glow, but the guests' eyes slid past her the way they slid past furniture. She'd learned this invisibility years ago, the kind born not of magic, but of survival. Her hands never shook, her steps never faltered. She anticipated collisions before they happened, a drunk executive lurching left, a socialite stepping backward without looking, a waiter cutting too close with a dessert cart. She adjusted her path each time, a half step here, a shoulder turn there, gliding through chaos with choreographed grace. She'd learned this from her father. Captain Roberto Cruz had been a logistics officer in the Navy, a man who saw the world through grids and vectors. When Sarah was young, too young to understand why other fathers played catch while hers drew diagrams, He would sit her down at their kitchen table and teach her to see motion before it happened. "Everything bounces off something else," he'd say, rolling a marble across the wooden surface. "Watch the angle. Predict the path. The world is just a table, mija. Learn the geometry and you'll never be surprised." He didn't mean billiards, he meant life. But life had surprised her anyway. His illness came sudden and vicious, a rare autoimmune disorder that devoured their savings faster than the disease devoured him. 3 years of experimental treatments, 2 years of hospice. By the time he died, Sarah had aged a decade in her early 20s, and the medical debt had swallowed her future whole. She'd been studying mathematics at the state university. She'd dreamed of actuarial science, maybe even teaching. But dreams cost money, and creditors didn't accept potential as payment. So she'd traded equations for trays, theorems for tips. Tonight, she wasn't even supposed to be here. She was covering for Maria, a co-worker whose daughter had a fever-pure chance, the kind of cosmic dice roll her father would have calculated odds for. Sarah paused near the main stage, balancing her tray on one palm while scanning the room. Her eyes caught details others missed, the slight tilt of a champagne flute indicating a guest's dominant hand, the acoustics of the hall predicting where applause would crescendo, the way light bent around the cue ball a half-second before a player struck. She noticed the microphone feedback before the sound tech did. She saw the photographer's camera angle shift before the subject posed. She watched Trent, the Hawk, Hensley chalking his cue with theatrical precision, and she knew, without being told, that his next shot would be a long rail, high risk, designed for gasps rather than strategy. The Hawk was 39, but moved like a man 10 years younger, his body a weapon honed through decades of competition. His tailored Navy suit probably cost more than Sarah earned in 6 months. His smile was sharp, his eyes sharper, and his reputation sharpest of all. He didn't just play snooker. He conquered it, dominated it, turned it into a referendum on his own brilliance. The crowd adored him. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed through the sound system, "3-time world champion, the man who's never lost a televised match, Trent the Hawk Hensley." Applause thundered, phones lifted like offerings. Hawk raised his cue in acknowledgement, his grin calibrated for maximum charm. Sarah moved behind the stage, collecting empty glasses. She'd learned long ago not to watch too closely. Guests hated being studied by the help. But her peripheral vision was excellent. Hawk leaned over the table. The break was perfect. Reds scattered like startled birds. He sank 2 in quick succession, then gestured grandly to the audience as if conducting an orchestra he played for cameras, not for score. Sarah adjusted her grip on the tray, compensating for the weight distribution as she added another glass. She was turning toward the bar when it happened. A sponsor, middle-aged, red-faced, gesturing wildly about stock options, stepped backward without looking. His elbow caught Sarah's forearm. The tray tilted. Physics took over. One glass slipped. Sarah's hand shot out, fingers closing around empty air. The crystal tumbler hit the floor and exploded into a constellation of shards, the sound cutting through conversation like a gunshot. The hall went silent. Every head turned. Sarah froze, still holding the tray, her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and throat. Hawk straightened slowly from his shot, cue still in hand. His eyes found her, cold, calculating, entertained. "You just cost me my rhythm," he said, his voice amplified by the stage microphones. The smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. "Do you have any idea what rhythm is worth at my level?" "I'm very sorry, sir," Sarah began, but he cut her off with a raised hand. "You like the game?" Hawk asked, spinning the cue between his fingers like a baton. "Think it looks easy?" The audience leaned forward. This was better than snooker. This was blood sport. "Tell you what," Hawk continued, his grin widening. Sink one red before I clear the table, and I'll wire you $10 million. He paused for effect. What's your name, sweetheart? Sarah. Well, Sarah, Hawk said, playing to the cameras now, phones recording from every angle. Beat the Hawk, win $10 million. But if you lose... His smile turned cruel. You're fired tonight. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The sponsor who'd bumped her went pale. Her manager, standing near the bar, looked like he might vomit. Someone whispered, he can't do that. But no one stopped him. The cameras were rolling. The crowd wanted a show. Sarah's manager caught her eye, shaking his head frantically. Walk away. Just walk away. But Sarah wasn't looking at him. She was looking at Hawk, at the overconfident tilt of his shoulders, the theatrical flourish of his grip, the way he'd already turned back to the table as if she'd disappeared. Her father's voice echoed across the years. Angles don't lie. People do. She set down her tray carefully, the glasses settling without a sound. Then she walked onto the stage and said, voice steady as stone, Deal. Hawk laughed, a rich rolling sound designed for viral clips and highlight reels. He chalked his cue with exaggerated precision, each twist of his wrist a miniature performance. Camera flashes erupted like strobe lights. Someone in the crowd whistled. A woman near the bar raised her phone higher, angling for the perfect shot of the champion about to humiliate the help. This'll be quick, Hawk announced, addressing the audience rather than Sarah. I'll try to make it last at least 30 seconds, for entertainment value, the crowd roared. Sarah stood at the edge of the stage, rolling up her sleeves with movements so economical they seemed rehearsed. Her fingers worked the fabric methodically, left cuff, right cuff, revealing forearms marked with the faint tan lines of someone who worked in sunlight during lunch breaks. Her face remained expressionless, but her eyes never left the table. She wasn't watching Hawk. She was reading the geometry. The referee, an elderly man in a bow tie who'd officiated championships across 3 continents, positioned the triangle of reds with arthritic care, 15 balls in perfect formation, the apex kissing the pink spot. The cue ball waited at the opposite end, pristine white against green felt. Hawk approached the table like a matador entering the ring. He bent low, cue sliding through the bridge of his fingers, his back leg extended for balance. The pose was textbook, the kind of form analyzed in training videos and coaching manuals. But Sarah noticed the angle was off by 3 degrees, showmanship over efficiency. The break exploded through the hall. The crack of impact made several guests flinch. Reds scattered across the table in a perfect chaos, mathematical in its distribution. 2 balls rolled toward pockets but stopped just short, as if Hawk had calculated their mercy. Beautiful, someone murmured. Hawk didn't acknowledge the compliment. He was already moving, circling the table with predatory fluidity. He'd shifted into performance mode, the version of himself that had earned sponsorships, magazine covers, and a net worth that could buy this venue twice over. He potted a red in the corner pocket. Clean. Immediate. The audience applauded. Then the black reset for the next sequence. Another red, this one across the table's width, requiring spin and pace calculation that would have challenged most professionals. Hawk made it look effortless. 6 minutes, he called out, grinning at the cameras. I'm giving myself 6 minutes to clear this table. Someone time me. A dozen phones started timers. Sarah stood motionless, arms crossed, her weight balanced evenly on both feet. Her breathing was steady, 4 counts in, 4 counts out, a rhythm her father had taught her during his worst pain episodes. Control your breath, control your mind. Hawk continued his clinic red, black, the pattern of professional snooker, each successful pot earning him the right to attempt the highest value ball available. His cue work was genuinely masterful, the kind of skill that required 10,000 hours of practice and natural talent most people would never possess. By his 6th red, the crowd had gone quiet with awe. This wasn't competition. It was exhibition, domination. "He's never missing," a voice whispered from the VIP section. "Poor girl doesn't stand a chance," another replied. Hawk lined up his seventh shot, a straightforward red positioned near the center pocket, perhaps 2 feet from the hole routine. Elementary. The kind of shot he'd made thousands of times in his sleep. He struck. The cue ball kissed the red at what should have been the perfect angle. Should have been. The red hit the pocket jaw, that cruel millimeter of cushion that separates success from failure, and bounced out, rolling back toward the center of the table. The gasp was collective, involuntary. Hawk straightened, his expression frozen between confusion and disbelief. He stared at the pocket as if it had personally betrayed him. "Table must be off," he muttered, loud enough for the microphones to catch. But Sarah had seen what actually happened. During the chaos of the broken glass, a waiter had quickly wiped the area near Hawk's position, but moisture from the champagne had condensed on the felt, creating a nearly invisible patch of resistance. The humidity had altered the friction coefficient by a fraction, negligible to most players, fatal to perfection. Hawk had overestimated the table's consistency. He'd played for the cameras instead of reading the surface. Arrogance, Sarah thought, is miscalculation disguised as confidence. The referee stepped forward, his voice formal and precise. "Miss Cruz, the table is yours." The hall went silent. Sarah walked to the cue rack and selected one, not the premium model Hawk had used, but a house cue with worn tape on the grip. She tested its weight, rolling it across her palms, feeling for balance, serviceable. Adequate. She approached the table. The red Hawk had missed sat 18 inches from the corner pocket, a gift from his error. The cue ball rested nearby at an accommodating angle, basic trigonometry. Elementary physics. Sarah bent low, her left hand forming a bridge, her right drawing the cue back in a smooth, unhurried motion. She didn't look at the crowd, didn't acknowledge the cameras, her entire world compressed to vectors and momentum. Her father's voice. "Every collision is a conversation between angles. Listen to what they're saying." She struck. The sound was softer than Hawk's breaks, less theatrical, more surgical. The cue ball kissed the red with precision geometry. The red rolled forward, touched the cushion, and dropped into the pocket with a satisfying clunk. The crowd erupted. Applause crashed over the stage like a wave. Someone shouted, "She did it!" Another voice, "The bet's over." But Hawk was already moving, his face flushed, his jaw set. He raised both hands, quieting the audience with the practiced authority of someone who'd commanded rooms for 2 decades. "One shot," he said, his voice carrying despite the lack of amplification. His smile had returned, but it was different now, sharper, with an edge of something desperate beneath the charm. "That was the minimum, but if you want the real money," he turned to the cameras, playing to his bass, "clear the table, 20 million, double or nothing." The audience lost its mind. Chants started immediately. "Double or nothing! Double or nothing!" Sponsors stood from their booths. Phones recorded from every conceivable angle. The referee looked toward the event coordinator, seeking guidance that didn't come. This had stopped being a charity exhibition. It had become something rawer, more primal. Sarah met Hawk's eyes across the table. She saw what he was doing, transforming his mistake into spectacle, his loss into entertainment, his wounded pride into higher stakes. But she also saw the calculation error. He'd assumed she wanted money. That greed would override caution. He didn't understand that some people played different games entirely. 20 million, Hawk repeated, pointing his cue at her like a weapon. "Clear the table, and it's yours. But if you miss even once, you walk away with nothing." The crowd held its breath. Sarah picked up the chalk, blue cube, worn smooth, and applied it to her cue tip with deliberate rotations. When she spoke, her voice was quiet enough that people in the back leaned forward to hear. "Your shot first." Hawk blinked. "What?" "You offered double or nothing," Sarah said. "That means we're both playing. You clear your balls, I clear mine. First to finish wins." The referee nodded slowly. That would be the standard interpretation. Hawk's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable unless you were watching for it. Sarah was watching for it. "Fine," Hawk said, recovering quickly. "Age before beauty." He bent to the table, selected his target, a red near the side rail, and potted it with vicious precision. But Sarah noticed his breathing had changed, shorter intervals, shallower draws. Pressure, she thought. Hawk cleared 3 more reds in quick succession, his skill undeniable but his rhythm different now. Faster, aggressive. Each shot carried the weight of defending territory rather than claiming it. After his 4th red, he attempted a long pot across the table's diagonal, high risk, high reward. The kind of shot that made compilations and earned standing ovations. He made it. The crowd roared. Hawk grinned, pointing at Sarah with his cue. "Your turn's coming, sweetheart. Hope you're ready." He lined up his next shot, a simple red near the center pocket, and missed. Not by much. The ball rattled in the jaws before staying out, but enough. Sarah stepped to the table and began her sequence. She played without flourish, each shot constructed from pure mathematics. Red, black, the pattern her father had shown her on paper napkins during hospital cafeteria dinners. She potted 6 balls in methodical succession. Then, with the 7th, she did something unexpected. She missed. Deliberately. The cue ball stopped rolling in a position that made the audience murmur in confusion. It sat tucked behind a cluster of reds, perfectly blocking Hawk's path to any legal shot. The referee examined the table, then made his call. "Snooker, Mr. Hensley, you're blocked." Hawk's face went pale. He circled the table twice, searching for angles that didn't exist. Every potential shot violated the rules, blocked by the very balls he needed to pot. He looked up at Sarah, and for the first time his confidence cracked. She met his gaze, her expression unchanged. "You just don't have a shot," she said quietly. Hawk stared at the table like it had personally betrayed him. The snooker, Sarah's perfectly calculated trap, left him with no legal path forward. Every angle led to a foul. Every option violated the rules he'd built his career mastering. His jaw clenched. The muscle beneath his ear twitched. "Come on, Hawk!" someone shouted from the VIP section. "You've got this!" The chant started small but grew. "Hawk! Hawk! Hawk!" His fans, and he had many in this room, were trying to will him back to dominance through sheer noise. They needed him to be untouchable. Their bets, their bragging rights, their parasocial relationship with his perfection, all depended on it. Hawk fed on the energy like oxygen. He straightened, rolled his shoulders, and approached the table with renewed aggression. He would force a shot, any shot. The first attempt was a bank shot off 2 cushions, trying to curve the cue ball around the obstacle Sarah had created, technically legal if he could make the geometry work. He couldn't. The cue ball clipped a red that wasn't his target. Foul. The referee's voice was quiet but absolute. 4-point penalty to Miss Cruz. Hawk's face flushed crimson. He didn't argue, he knew the rules, but his grip on the cue tightened until his knuckles went white. Sarah stood motionless at the edge of the stage, her expression unchanged, but her eyes tracked everything, the tension in his shoulders, the irregular breathing, the way his gaze kept flicking to the cameras instead of the table. He's not playing snooker anymore, she thought. He's playing to an audience that's starting to doubt him. Hawk tried again. This time he attempted a jump shot, elevating the cue ball to leap over the blocking reds. It was legal in professional play, and Hawk had executed hundreds of them in tournaments. But this wasn't a tournament. This was desperation, dressed as strategy. The cue ball jumped, cleared one red, but landed with too much force and skittered off the table entirely, bouncing once on the glass floor before rolling beneath a velvet booth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Foul," the referee announced. 7-point penalty. Hawk slammed his cue against his palm, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough that the sharp crack echoed through the hall. The cameras caught it. Every phone recorded it. His carefully constructed persona was fracturing in real time. The crowd's energy shifted. The cheers became uncertain. Murmurs replaced chants. Several guests exchanged glances that said the same thing. Is he actually losing? Sarah moved to the table for her turn. She didn't need to pot anything dramatic. The penalties Hawk had accumulated gave her a comfortable lead, but she played her shot anyway. A simple red into the corner pocket, executed with the calm precision of someone solving a math problem they'd already checked twice. The ball dropped. Polite applause followed. Hawk was back at the table, his face now a mask of forced composure. He had one potential shot left, a difficult cut on a red ball positioned near the rail. He'd need perfect angle control and pace judgment. He bent low, his breathing audible through the microphones. Sarah stepped closer, just within his peripheral vision. Her voice was soft, almost conversational, but the acoustics of the hall carried it farther than she intended. "You said you'd fire me if I lost." Hawk's eyes flicked toward her, his concentration breaking. He straightened slightly, a smirk returning to his face, muscle memory of arrogance kicking in. "Still true, sweetheart," he said, loud enough for the audience to hear. Sarah tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "But you're not my boss." The words landed like stones in still water. Silence spread outward in concentric circles. The crowd went quiet. Cameras zoomed in, producers in broadcast vans suddenly aware they were witnessing something bigger than a game. Hawk blinked. "What? You work for the sponsors?" Sarah continued, her voice carrying the same calm certainty she'd used to call the snooker. "I work for the lounge. You don't have the authority to fire me. You never did." The referee's eyebrows rose slightly. The most emotion he'd shown all evening. A sponsor in the third row, a silver-haired woman in a jade dress who'd written 7-figure checks to bring Hawk to this event, leaned forward, her expression shifting from amusement to something colder. Hawk opened his mouth, closed it, then tried for a laugh. "It's just part of the bet." "No," Sarah interrupted gently. "It was a bluff. You made a threat you couldn't enforce to pressure me into a game where the stakes were asymmetrical. I risked humiliation. You risked nothing." The murmurs grew louder. Phones captured every word. The event hashtag was already trending, though no one in the hall knew it yet. Another sponsor stood, a tech entrepreneur whose face Sarah recognized from TED Talks. His voice carried authority. "She's right. Hawk, you're not an employee of this venue. You can't terminate their staff." The woman in jade added, her tone sharp. "And threatening someone's livelihood for entertainment isn't the image we're paying you to project." Hawk's face went through a remarkable transformation. Red to white to a mottled combination of both, his carefully cultivated charm evaporated, leaving something smaller and meaner beneath. "It was a joke," he stammered. "Everyone knew it was a joke." "I didn't," Sarah said quietly. The hall went silent again. She took a step closer to the table, her eyes meeting his across the green felt. "You weren't betting $10 million, she said, her voice steady and clear. "You were betting your pride. And you assumed I'd be too afraid to call you on it." For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then Sarah turned to the table, lined up her final shot, the last red followed by the black, and executed both with the methodical precision of someone who'd already won in her mind before her hands ever touched the cue. The red dropped into the corner pocket with a soft click. The black followed, rolling across the felt and falling into the center pocket with the finality of a judge's gavel. The sound echoed through the hall like a verdict. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the applause began, tentative at first, then building into a roar that shook the chandeliers people stood. Cameras flashed. The crowd surged forward, pressing against the stage barriers. Sarah set down her cue carefully, as if it were made of glass. Hawk stood frozen, his face drained of color, his eyes wide with the dawning realization that every camera in the room had just documented his complete and public humiliation. Someone in the crowd shouted, "She hustled him." Hawk seized on it like a lifeline. "She hustled me," he repeated, louder, trying to turn the narrative, trying to make himself the victim of a con rather than the architect of his own downfall. The referee, who had officiated matches in 11 countries and seen every variety of human behavior a competitive sport could produce, stepped forward. His voice was soft, but it carried, "No, Mr. Hensley," he said. "You hustled yourself." The words hit harder than any insult could have. Hawk's face crumbled. He opened his mouth, searching for a comeback, a joke, anything to restore his image. Nothing came. The silence stretched, excruciating and absolute. Then he turned and walked off the stage, shoving through the crowd without meeting anyone's eyes, his cue abandoned on the felt like a surrender flag. The cameras followed him all the way to the exit. Within minutes, the footage was uploading. Within an hour, it would be viral. Within a day, Waitress destroys Snooker champion would be the top trend across 3 continents. But Sarah didn't know that yet. She stood on the stage, surrounded by strangers applauding something they didn't fully understand, and felt only the quiet satisfaction of having solved a problem her father would have been proud of. The lounge manager appeared at her elbow, his face pale but relieved. "The sponsors want to speak with you," he whispered. "And Miss Cruz, you still have a job, obviously." Sarah nodded, her expression unchanged. She picked up her tray from where she'd set it down a lifetime ago. The glasses were still there, waiting to be delivered. Some things, she thought, didn't change just because the world did. Hawk didn't look back. He shoved through the crowd with the single-minded determination of someone fleeing a crime scene. His shoulders hunched, his face angled away from the cameras that followed him like predators tracking wounded prey. A reporter from Sports Global tried to intercept him near the coat check, microphone extended, but Hawk batted it aside with enough force that the woman stumbled backward into a decorative column. "Mr. Hensley, can you comment on—" "No comment," he snarled, the words barely human. He disappeared through the gilded exit doors, leaving behind a hall crackling with electric shock. The crowd had witnessed something they couldn't quite categorize. Not quite sport, not quite theater, something rawer and more unsettling than either. Within 20 minutes, the first clip appeared on social media. 30 seconds of Sarah sinking the final black, while Hawk's face drained of color in the background. The caption read, "Waitress destroys arrogant snooker champion. Watch till the end." Within an hour, it had 2 million views. By midnight, the sponsors had released a joint statement, drafted by lawyers who understood that proximity to humiliation was contagious. "Following tonight's events at the Billiards for Hope exhibition, we are placing Trent Hensley on indefinite suspension pending a comprehensive review of conduct unbecoming of a professional athlete and brand ambassador. We remain committed to the values of respect, integrity, and sportsmanship." The statement was corporate sanitized, but the message was clear. Hawk had become radioactive by morning. Headlines had metastasized across continents. Snooker legend humiliated by Waitress on live TV. The $10 million bluff. How arrogance cost a champion everything. Genius Waitress outplays pro in viral showdown. The narrative had escaped Hawk's control entirely. He'd spent 20 years building a brand of untouchable excellence, and Sarah had dismantled it in 20 minutes with nothing but geometry and truth. While the internet burned with commentary, Sarah wiped down tables the Royal Elysian had emptied quickly after the spectacle. Guests departing in clusters, their conversations animated, their phones glowing. The catering staff moved through the wreckage of the evening with practiced efficiency, collecting abandoned champagne flutes and crumpled napkins, restoring order to chaos. Sarah worked her section methodically, her movements unchanged from the beginning of her shift. Spray bottle, cloth, circular motions, the muscle memory of survival. Her manager found her near the third snooker table, the one where it had all happened. He approached cautiously, as if she might be a different species now, something that had evolved mid-shift into a form he no longer recognized. "Sarah," he said, his voice unsteady. "Can we talk?" She set down her cloth. "Of course." He glanced around, confirming they were relatively alone, then pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded it. "The sponsors contacted ownership an hour ago," he said. "They wired $10 million to the Billiards for Hope charity fund." He paused, swallowing. "They're calling it your victory bonus, your donation." Sarah's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or vindication. "It's for the kids," she said quietly. Her manager nodded, relief flooding his features. That's what I told them you'd say." He folded the paper again, creasing it with unnecessary precision. "Sarah, I'm sorry I should have stopped him. I should have—" "You couldn't have," she interrupted gently. "He was playing to the cameras. Anything you said would have made it worse." The manager looked at her for a long moment, seeing perhaps for the first time the intelligence that had always been there, camouflaged by polyester uniforms and economic necessity. "You're not really a waitress, are you?" he asked. Sarah smiled faintly. "Tonight I was." An hour later, after the last glass had been washed and the last table wiped, the lounge owner appeared in the break room. Marcus Webb was 73, a former prosecutor who'd bought the Royal Elysian as a retirement project and discovered he enjoyed curating experiences for the wealthy. He moved slowly, his cane clicking against the tile floor, but his eyes were sharp. "Miss Cruz," he said, "a moment of your time?" Sarah stood, still wearing her serving vest, her hair slightly disheveled from the evening's chaos. Webb extended an envelope, cream-colored, expensive paper, the kind used for wedding invitations and legal settlements. "Open it," he said. Inside, Sarah found 2 items. The first was a letter on official letterhead from the National Institute of Strategic Analytics, one of the country's premier research universities, specializing in game theory, predictive modeling, and decision science. The letter began, "Dear Ms. Cruz, on the recommendation of Marcus Webb, and following review of tonight's remarkable demonstration of applied strategic thinking," it was a full scholarship 4 years, all expenses covered, stipend included. The second item was Webb's personal letter of recommendation, written in fountain pen on his private stationery. The final paragraph read, "Sarah Cruz possesses the rarest form of intelligence, the kind that sees patterns where others see chaos and maintains humanity while executing perfect strategy. She will be an asset to any institution wise enough to invest in her potential." Sarah's hands shook slightly as she read. She set the papers down carefully, blinking against something that might have been tears or might have been exhaustion or might have been the delayed shock of adrenaline finally draining away. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why?" Webb lowered himself into a chair, his expression thoughtful. "The world has enough champions, Miss Cruz," he said quietly. "Men like Hawk, who excel at narrow skills and mistake mastery for wisdom. What we lack, what we desperately need, are people who can see, who can read systems, anticipate consequences, understand the geometry of human behavior. He gestured toward the envelope. You didn't win a snooker match tonight. You solved a problem, and you did it with grace, precision, and not a single wasted motion. He paused. That's not talent. That's training meeting opportunity.
Thank you for watching until the end. If Sarah's story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember that intelligence and courage can defeat arrogance. Tell us in the comments what you'd do in her position. Until next time, keep seeing the angles.